Hi there, and welcome to the Animation Industry Podcast. My name is Terry, and when I was 14 years old, I started making stop-motion animations in my bedroom using my grandpa's old camera. Ever since, I've been obsessed with everything to do with animation, and right now, I'm a student at Sheridan College. I created this podcast to connect with and learn from some of the biggest names in the industry, their best practices, the hardships they went through, and what to focus on to make it in today's changing animation world. It's my hope that by sharing this info that you too have the best chance of success. Now let's get started. Today, we're talking about how to make it as a freelance and a professional illustrator with the super talented Lawrence Hugh Burns. Lawrence is a graduate from the University of the Arts in Philadelphia, where he received his BFA in illustration in 2009. Since graduation, he has pursued a number of projects, both professional and personal, including book cover design, card game illustrations, and graphic novels. And he currently works as a full-time illustrator and designer for the backpack and apparel brand Sprayground in New York City. I became familiar with Lawrence's work when I stumbled across his Instagram during Inktober a few years ago, and I instantly fell in love with the amazingly grotesque renditions he does of SpongeBob and Rick and Morty and Rugrats and all these other cartoon characters. So, thank you so much for joining me today, Lawrence. Now, I always start things off by asking, what influenced you as a kid to get into this industry?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me, Terry. It's good to be here. And this question always gives me pause, just because I never really stopped to think and realize where my inspiration came from. But growing up, I was fascinated. I'm talking really young here. Picture books were, an escape to a completely new world. Impossible worlds that obviously didn't exist in my youth, and I just absorbed those. Addictively. It was just the illustrations in these picture books were so just alluring. So really young, I would always just pour through different picture books. But beyond that, in grade school growing up, I specifically recall moments where my teachers would read us, chapters in The Hobbit or chapters from the Redwall series, and have the class draw, what they were describing. And that was always a lot of fun, because I got to interpret these characters that at the time I didn't realize were really established in the literature world or anything. And I got to interpret them with my own, like the way I thought. So it was a really fun exercise for my imagination. And, couple that with the Sunday strips, specifically Calvin and Hobbes, which I absolutely loved as a kid. Absolutely. It was their expressions, the line work, the storytelling. It just captivated me. I don't know what it was about it, but everything was just so perfect. I could just tell that Bill Watterson knew what he was doing, and he did it so deftly, just like a pen and ink, and it was so striking in that regard. I actually, when I was young, I would trace over Calvin and Hobbes panels, but I would draw my own characters. I didn't realize it at the time, but that was a pretty interesting exercise to learn how to do these gestures and everything. But I would just use my own characters, but in their poses and everything like that. And I feel like that helped me get a sense of the character's spacing and weight and everything like that. But on top of that, of course, there was the golden age of Nickelodeon, which I was fortunate enough to grow up with. Specifically speaking, Ren and Stimpy. I don't know why I latched onto that one, but I did. I really think it was because whenever it was on TV, my dad would watch it with me, and he would just be belly laughing the whole time. And I didn't really understand why. I just thought, it was fart jokes and just weird, grotesque humor, but I thought it was really funny and strange. And watching it now, I'm so surprised that my parents let me watch it back then, because it's so vulgar. And for it to be on Nickelodeon at that time, I guess they just didn't realize. But it just stuck with me, and it's just like a part of my brain now. So I think the combination of all of that kind of turned into where I am today. which is really cool because I've always loved Nickelodeon. Even now, I think they do great content. SpongeBob is such a force, and I distinctly recall it was like 20 years ago when it first came out, or it will be 20 years. Actually, no, it'll be 20 years this year. So yeah, all that stewed together in my brain, produced me. So here I am, doing what I do.
I can definitely see a lot of Ren and Stimpy influences in your artwork.
Yeah.
So I wanted to talk about kind of both the career paths that you've kind of taken. One is like the freelance side, and one is the professional side. I'm thinking maybe we can start with the professional side. So, how did you end up, going from graduating in 2009 to becoming an illustrator at a studio, and like how much did you have to hustle to get there, and kind of can you explain that path?
Yeah, the path was not easy. First of all, I graduated in 2009, which, if correct me if I'm wrong, was the worst economic recession in living history. Worse or just as bad as the Great Depression. So I went to art school, graduated in an economy where there were literally zero jobs for people like us, and people that did have those jobs held onto them ferociously. So while I was at school, I would do landscaping during the holidays just to have a buck. And when I graduated, I stayed in Philadelphia, tried to make it work where I was doing my own thing, getting freelance here and there, and I was bussing tables just to have some money in my pocket, and that didn't really work so well. Philly, as great a city as it is, it's not a very good city to be working in creatively. Not compared to NYC or LA, that is. But I moved back to New York and took that landscaping job again, and I stuck with it. It was fine for what it was. It gave me money in my pocket. I was able to move out of my house with it, because I moved up to business development and then sales for this company. But all the while I was doing that, I would give myself projects just to keep my creative juices, loose, and my muscles, my drawing muscles and everything just, in shape. Like, the graphic novel I was working on, it wasn't for any publisher. It was just something for me. It was a creative outlet just so I could test myself and keep myself fresh and everything. But that's the landscaping side. I was there a very long time, and I was just saying, I can't make a career out of this. I don't want to. It's not what I went to school for. But all the while I was there, I was applying for design jobs here and there. And as the economy got better, more jobs were there, but it's a very competitive field. And full-time illustration work, it's out there, but it's very competitive. So, I would make profiles on Career Builder, Indeed, LinkedIn, Monster, and I was just putting my resume out left and right, and no one was really biting the whole time I was doing this landscaping. And then, 3 years later, when I was in the sales part of it, I got a phone call from this woman named Joni, and she's just like, Larry. I'm like, no, this is Lawrence. And she's like, Larry, it's Joni, and like, I know her. And I'm just like, okay, what's up? And she's like, I have an opportunity for you. I found your profile on Career Builder. And I was like, wow, I haven't checked that in 3 years.
Oh, wow.
But yeah, I mean, she told me about Sprayground, and she got me a meeting with my current boss there at Sprayground, and then by the end of that week, I had an offer. So it was serendipitous. Honestly, it was very serendipitous how it happened. But all the work that I was doing while I was doing my landscaping gig, I was, feeding it into my Instagram, and, I was putting it out there for people to see, and, I was gaining a following, and, I was still growing creatively, which was nice. And that really became supplemental material when I went in for my meeting at Sprayground. I had my portfolio, sure, but I pulled up my Instagram, and Sprayground is a very, street, urban, stylized, they go for that really kind of cartoony, sort of warped but approachable look. Like, that's one of their aesthetics. And, my boss, he loved it. And I think doing all that work and staying creative helped me in the long run to get where I am today. So, I understand as a creative, it's difficult to find full-time work. And if you're working a job that you don't like, you need to keep doing your creative thing on the side, because A, it will help your sanity. At least it helps my sanity. And B, it will help you get a job down the road.
Yeah, so it sounds like you kind of played a little bit of the numbers game at first, where you were just putting yourself out there on as many platforms as possible, and then just doing your thing on the side, and constantly improving by giving yourself projects until something paid off, right?
Yeah, I mean, the giving myself projects was just more a means to keep myself sane, because I don't know, me personally, if I go a couple days without making any sort of mark on paper, even if it's just some like crummy doodle, like I start feeling, odd, like, or just like imbalanced, like I just need that release sometimes. And, I knew in my heart of hearts that landscaping was not going to be my job for the rest of my life. But being in New York City, it definitely opened up some avenues to me, because I was doing the sales in New York City too. So I got to like see, my friends who were working creatively, and like, I got to reconnect with, old schoolmates and everything like that, when they were able to help me out. So I was in the right place, but I just wasn't doing the right job.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of that putting pencil to paper thing, I hear that from a lot of other artists too, where it's like, even though you're working on creative stuff, you still have to do your own stuff on the side to stay sane. And I want to get back to the social media aspect and stuff like that, but first, I want to know what it's like to be a full-time illustrator at a studio. Can you kind of go into that experience?
Yeah, of course. Sprayground is a unique, um, kind of like, it's not your average studio, because we're in the fashion industry, and never in my wildest dreams did I ever think I'd be working in fashion, of all places. I know illustrators that can get, there's fashion illustration. There's certainly room for illustrators to be in that industry, but with the work that I did, my style and everything, fashion, I thought, was the last place I would end up. Lo and behold, though, I'm at Sprayground, and Sprayground in and of itself is a very unique, wild, amazing company to work for. The best part about it for me was that it introduced me to working with these IPs like Nickelodeon, like the properties underneath Nickelodeon or Cartoon Network, in a way that, that's not typical for, fashion brands to be working with. Sprayground's claim to fame, at least with the licensed artwork, is that we take their characters and create complete original artwork, which, years ago would have been unheard of for anyone in the fashion industry to do, because licensors are very, very strict about their intellectual property. And Nickelodeon at first was very hesitant to allow us to do that. But once they saw how well these bags were selling, they have given us free reign. And in a number of ways, Nickelodeon has been one of our first core, believers in the brand. And when I came on board, I saw the SpongeBob bags that they had done. And since I've been there, which is about 3.5 years now, we've expanded. We have Nickelodeon, we have Marvel, we've got Cartoon Network, to name a few, and even, the NFL and Mega Man. We work with Sega, and, so we have Sonic the Hedgehog. It's just like our licensed stuff is far reaching, and licensed work will always sell. That's not to say that we don't have our own original stuff, of course. Sprayground as a brand, we have our own characters, and we are, without divulging too much, because I'm not allowed to, are trying to, expand on that IP, where we have our own kind of world with our own kind of characters. So
can you describe, so like you have like SpongeBob and Sonic, can you describe what exactly you're drawing for your apparel and backpacks? Like,
yeah,
are you
of
just
course,
straight
of
up drawing
course.
SpongeBob, or you said it's a little different?
Oh yeah, it's not just SpongeBob slapped on a bag, calling it a day. So, for example, last back to school season, which is our biggest season, that's when we make the most. That's when we sell the most. It's about 70% of our business, I believe. We created a bag where we took the Sprayground staff, turned them into SpongeBob characters. So they were in the style of SpongeBob characters, we were all fish or squids or anything. So it looked like we were in the world with them. And the artwork was SpongeBob's house, and then Squidward's and Patrick's house on either side. And we're all it's just like chaos. SpongeBob's house has got spray paint all over it. There's characters from the show running around with us as characters from the show running around. And Nickelodeon was like, this is a crazy idea, but we're into it. So a big part of our philosophy at Sprayground is that we like to tell stories. So each of our bags is kind of like telling a story, and I think that's a really good example of that.
Cool. Yeah. So you kind of honed your skills, your unique aesthetic maybe before you started working at Sprayground, but what kind of skills and like technical and soft skills keep you kind of on your toes while you're at the studio and have contributed to your success?
Well, I think consistency is key. I know consistency is key. It's just a matter of being disciplined to pull it off. Same with time management, which I am personally terrible at, but I know working illustrators who survive off freelance alone, that just the fact that they are so good with their time management allows them to be as successful as they are. But for me, since I'm at a studio all day creating, like I have little time when I come home to do my own thing, but I still put in the time to do it because A, I have deadlines aside from, my studio work, and B, it's just good creatively because I'm all day, I'm working on someone else's project. When I come home, that's when I'm working my own stuff. So time management I know is essential, obviously. Let's see, consistency as well, of course. And also things like professionalism. If you're reaching out to potential clients, you want to come off as, professional and like, what you're doing, you want, and this is all minor detail stuff. Like, you don't want your email to be something ridiculous, like, XX cool boy 420 XX at yahoo.com. You want it to be your name.
I kind of want my email to be XX cool boy.
Yeah, go for it. But this is just boiling down to my own personal preferences. But if I got an email from XX cool boy 420 XX at yahoo.com, but the body of his email was like, put together and correct grammar and everything like that, I would be hesitant at first, but I would take it seriously. But if it's riddled with, spelling errors, or, you're spelling you with the letter U and stuff like that, I'm just I dismiss it. And I'm just like, I think if you want to be taken seriously, you need to portray yourself seriously. So, simple little things like having your email just be your name. I don't know, like maybe that's boring, but, or like LHB Art, or Terry Stories or something like that, for just an example. But and if you're branding yourself as a standalone freelance person that can do it all, I think where consistency comes into play is having your visual voice across all social media platforms be consistent, for lack of a better word. Just making sure that when you're looking at all these things together, and your portfolio too, your online portfolio, that they all live together well. I think as minor as these details might be, it really does go a long way. It shows that you care about how you're being perceived in the public, and it shows that you're polished and everything.
How about technical skills in the actual illustration part? Because you mentioned, time management and deadlines are always apparent. So how do technical skills play into that? If you finish the line work and now you're working on coloring it, but you only have like a day left, are there shortcuts you take that kind of work out, or you're just always kind of planning everything ahead of time, or is it just experience of knowing what's expected?
I think that comes down to knowing how you work as an individual. This card game that I'm working on right now, I was approached because I had a specific style that the client liked, and I took the budget into account for each illustration, and I'm using that information to dictate what the final art will look like, which for me, I know will still look polished enough in the end. But yeah, that's tough to answer because everyone works differently, I work digitally because it's quickly. I'm sorry, I work digitally because it's quick. People can work traditionally for freelance, but I would assume that they would just end up costing more because it just takes more time. I'm sure there are people out there that can create stuff traditionally in no time at all, but they probably charge, a fortune for that because they know it's good, they can do it quickly, and yeah.
So maybe let's take this freelance path a little further. You mentioned, you're working on a card game right now, which I think is amazing. And you also mentioned that they gave you a budget and you figured out what expectations they could have of your artwork. So, I mean, I know people who, and I've done this myself, where I'll get somebody reaching out to me on Instagram saying, "Hey, can you draw this for me?" And I'm like, "Sure, I'll charge you like $50." And then it ends up taking me 10 hours, and then I just like I got way underpaid. It wasn't really worth it for me. So how do you go about figuring out the budget and making sure that it's fair for you as the artist as well as the person asking for it? Maybe you have to just decline some projects or give expectations a little bit more heavily or something like that. Maybe just talk to that a bit.
Yeah, I think if you're approached with a project that you're not really feeling, and this might be, I don't know if this is rude or not, but something I learned in sales at least is like, say you're at there's a project that you get approached with, you're not really into it, but you don't want to say no, so you charge them an exorbitant amount. And I don't know if that's taking advantage of them, but you're just kind of like, they're going to say no. But if they say yes, then I mean, is it sleazy that you just like are going to make all this money, but now you're set up with this project you don't really want to work on? But I don't know. But more seriously, I think the big thing here is making sure that the client is respecting your time and that the pay you're getting reflects that. This is something I'm still working at. Like I've been terrible at this too. Math horrifies me, and there are formulas you can use to charge per hour, which is what a lot of freelancers do. I think with my specific work, say someone reaches out for just like a commission, they want a character, full color with, a full body shot. I would be like, yeah, $100, and that's feasible. But in regards to bigger projects like this card game, they approached me. They said that they needed, 64 illustrations, and they told me what templates and what sizes they would be and everything like that. And with that information, I was like, I think it's fair that I'm charging $100 per illustration because they want 64. That money adds up, and it comes out to a pretty legitimate price for the amount of work that I'm going to be doing. Because think about it, that's 64 drawings, and they need it by a certain time, and you're putting your life on hold and everything, so you need to be compensated fairly for that. And at the end of the day, I'm getting $6,400 for 64 illustrations, and there is potential there to, because they're going to be putting it up on Kickstarter, where some stretch goals and everything like that, which they want to keep me for. So I think where that comes from is, or like how to gauge that correctly is, I don't know. See, since I still feel like I'm so bad at it that
Well, maybe think back to like the first time you took on a project. I mean, for myself, and I know I've talked to others, there's like a certain level of confidence lacking. Like, oh, how much do I charge? Like $15 for like a full body or something like that. Like, how do you know how much you're worth from the beginning? I mean, for me to say $100 for a drawing, like maybe I don't feel comfortable at that level yet because I don't know if my art is worth that. Like thinking back to like maybe the first time you took a commission to now, how did you kind of evaluate that and find your self-worth in your artwork?
I think when I started seeing the demand, I started to realize my worth. Because I had done like a stupid drawing of Bart Simpson, and I did like a time lapse video a couple years ago, and that's kind of what jump started my Instagram following. And that's when I started getting more followers, and my posts started getting more likes, and I started getting more requests. And I was back then I was still like I was a little inundated. I didn't really know how to react to it, but I see the quality of my work now, and I can tell that it's at a level where I'm able to charge an amount that I am deeming reasonable for what they're getting. I think a lot of it has to do with how fast you can do it, how comfortable you are with the end product, and it's difficult to evaluate yourself in these situations too, because you don't know if what you're doing is going to be worth it. But if you look at it on the other side, you're paying someone, say I'm paying you for an illustration, I'm paying you for the time that you're taking to create this image that is essentially one of a kind. And, I consider that valuable. I think a lot of it is just kind of pulling the trigger. I think before we were recording, you told me that some of your friends or your coworkers, I'm sorry, your colleagues were charging $10 for a work that they were doing 5 hours worth of work on, and that is just absurd. They should just be giving it away at that point. I mean, I hope I'm not putting them on the spot right now, but
So like, how do you find that confidence when you're starting out fresh? Because you're right, I do see people undercharging because maybe $10, $15 is valuable at that point for them versus the fear of charging more and not getting anything out of that. So how do you find that confidence for somebody who's just starting out?
I think it's a matter of just looking at what you deem finished artwork and seeing how complex it is, and calculating the time it took you to complete said artwork. And I guess this is where math would come in. Me personally, I just like to throw a number, because if someone will request something from me, and I can kind of figure out how long it's going to take in my head. And I do rough math. I keep, I do like round numbers. I'm never like, $458.72. That's just ridiculous, unless you want to be like that. But I like nice, round, even numbers. And I think you can put down on a piece of paper in a certain amount of time, and, just knowing what to charge for that, because at the end of the day, it's your time, and time is your most valuable asset. You can never get it back. It's always running out. And you need to make sure that you're compensated fairly for something like that.
Makes sense. Yeah. Random quick question. When you're charging, do you do like a half upfront thing or like payment at the end, or?
Yeah, I would always try to secure at least half upfront.
Okay.
Or at most. I mean, in regards to the card game, they're paying me in installments because they're not going to throw $3,200 at me immediately. We're doing it as a per 10 illustrations. They're going to give me so when we started out, they gave me $500. When I finished the first 10, they gave me the second half of that, 1,000, and then another 500 for the second batch. I have a shirt illustration project that I'm currently working on, where the client gave me half of my sum up front, and that locks in my time for him. And totally, to be totally honest and transparent, it kind of lights a fire under my ass too, because I'm like, okay, he already gave me money. That means he needs this, like I can't forget about it. I can't just like let him do it. A lot of times if someone says they'll pay you, I prefer to secure it, because they're not going to like run away on you or like ghost you or anything. So I always try to secure at least half of what I'm charging.
I mean that makes sense to me, and I think that's a good practice. So speaking a little bit more about how you get these clients, you mentioned you did a Bart Simpson time lapse video. I think I
Yeah,
actually saw that one.
that goes way back, man, way back.
Well, I might have scrolled through your entire history at one point. So, um, so I'm assuming you get most of your inquiries through Instagram. Is that true? Or do people see your artwork from, the apparel that you're designing and also contact you there? I'm asking because I'm wondering, are there specific things that you do that you know are going to get attraction to your freelancing? So when you're on Instagram and you're like, you know what, I could pick up a few freelancing gigs this month, do you already have that demand, or do you post, I don't know, like another time lapse video to try to get more people on your Instagram so that maybe you increase chances of getting somebody? I don't know, like maybe you can just go through best practices of how to attract the right kind of freelance customers.
It's interesting because for me, I wasn't necessarily looking for it when I posted that video. It just like kind of like exploded and happened, and like I saw that there was a reaction, so I kept on doing more videos, and I saw I was getting more followers, more likes, and eventually I got these DMs. But if my well is a little dry, I'll just put out a call on Instagram and I'm like, hey, I'm doing commissions, or I will be happy to, or just yeah, I'm just doing commissions on Instagram. But commissions are one thing. Freelance work, like this card game, for example, or like the T-shirt design, um, came from the relationships I had built in the past. I always think it's a bad idea to burn bridges, no matter who it is. Because for whatever reason, they'll lead you to someone who is looking for design work. Case in point, my client for this card game is actually the husband of one of my very good friends from school. And I've known him a while, but he's finally able to fulfill this vision of his, and he wants me to be a part of it. And he was able to get like financial backing where he's able to pay me for it. So it's just stuff like that. Another example is my senior year professor at UArts. He ran a little boutique design studio outside Philadelphia, and he was very keen to my work as a student, and I interned for him after school. And when I moved away from Philadelphia, he contacted me when he had projects that he could, was able to pay me for. I always it's just networking is so important, in this regard. Even if you're not looking for the work, like you're just making friends, and they know you're a designer or an illustrator, and a lot of the times it comes to me. Like, of course you can look for it, you can go to Fiverr or whatever, or put out a call on Instagram, but a lot of times it just comes to me. And maybe that's just a testament to my work, not to toot my own horn or anything, but you put it out there, people are going to see it, and they're going to want work. And I think it's important that you just keep feeding the social media beast with your artwork, and eventually the right person's going to see it.
So you mentioned, networking has been really important to your career, and that's something I hear a lot, and that's also something that I found important to my career path as it stands right now. Can you speak to kind of what you do to network or maintain relationships over a long time? Like, obviously, the card game came from your friend's father, is that right?
My friend's husband.
Your friend's husband, sorry.
Yeah.
So that was more of a really personal connection. But say you make a connection with your prof, and that was years ago. How do you maintain that contact over time?
It could be as simple as every holiday or every Christmas or Hanukkah, you send them a little, hey, Professor, Merry Christmas, and here's a little doodle I did. It's stuff like that shows you're thinking about them.
Right.
It's
a really good idea, actually, to do like a yearly roundup of everybody you know.
Yeah, just add these people to your digital Rolodex and just send out an email blast. Hey, Merry Christmas. Happy New Year, with like a little like spot illustration or something like that. It's touching because it's personal, and it just plants in their minds like, oh, like Lawrence just sent me this cute little doodle, like maybe there's a job coming up that I have for them. It's
Yeah.
stuff like that. It's just a matter of being, personal or
I
personable,
just
I
wrote
should
that
say.
down. I think that's a great piece of advice right there.
Yeah.
'Cause sometimes it's at least I find it awkward to like randomly reach out when you haven't talked to somebody in such a long time. Like, what do you say? Or even if you have something to say, it's like, "Hi, how's it going? It's been like 3 years since we chatted. Hope everything's well." And they already know you're asking for something,
I
right?
know. I mean, that's where you can't let those. I mean, I know it's just natural. It happens. Like people just like move on and like move away. But if you left it open ended the last time you spoke to them, I don't think there's any harm in reaching out. You obviously they might know that you're looking for something, but like, what's so bad about hearing from someone you haven't heard from in a very long time? And what's
Yeah.
the worst that's going to happen? They're going to say, "Hey, like, hope you're well. I'm sorry, I don't have any work for you right now." And but at least it puts you back on their radar. If it
Yeah.
was like 10 years ago, that might make it even stranger because like I don't know, they could have gone through so much stuff in their life, and you're like, "Oh, you're just reaching out when you want something." But I don't know.
Exactly. So kind of the final thing about social media is I was wondering, do you have any like practical tips on how to, I mean, you have almost 13,000 followers now. Do you have any practical tips on how to increase engagement? Like for myself, I only have 1,000 followers, and many of the people I know are just starting out with a couple hundred. Like, what would you do to take that thousand to the next level?
So this is tricky. A few months ago, I was at 12.9. I checked this morning, I'm at
Oh no, you
12.7.
decreased.
Well, I know exactly why. I know exactly why. It's because I have not been very active. And Terry, as you know, like the past month for me has just been like chaotic, with
I
my,
know your last posts are almost from Inktober. Like
I
that's
know,
like
and
6 months ago.
that's crazy to me. It's because, Instagram forces you to just constantly post. Like that's the only way as far as I understand, your posts get boosted and that there's more engagement or anything like that. There's a science to it, a science that as I think I'm figuring it out, they just go and change the freaking algorithm on me. So I just need to like start from scratch. But the moment you become stale or stagnant on Instagram, your numbers are going to drop. And I'm just like, what's your problem? Like, how do you even know I'm not posting anything? But maybe they have to go out of the way to like unfollow me. And I think that's like a little weird, but,
Yeah.
um,
So you're kind of saying you need to continually post. However, like that's another sort of problem because for me, for instance, I only like to post like super polished work that I'm like super proud of. I don't post like work in progress or anything. And I also was talking to one of my classmates who is trying to like increase her bravery to post more because she's a little shy about her work too. So would you say, go about posting like I'm posting where it's only the super polished stuff or everything in between just to keep the updates going? Like, what's your experience with that?
um, I think what's good to create like kind of like a buffer for posts is you can work on your polished stuff, but why not show your followers, your sketch phase or just like a simple drawing in the meantime, just to like hold them over, because they're following you for a reason. They want to see your stuff, um, or show them the markers you're using, like your process, like your workstation. They're following you because it's you, like I know they're following you for your art, but it's a personal connection at the end of the day. Um, and they're hungry for content, and content is what you have to give them. I too am like you, where I only like to post like really polished stuff, and I only have so much time to do that. Um, and again, like I'll post some of my commission or freelance work, and I maybe get like 200 likes on it, which is abysmal compared to some of the amount of likes I'll get on other posts. And I really believe that time of day has a lot to do with it as well. But yeah, I think if your peer is shy about posting her work, she just needs to put it out there. I think she just needs to dive off, into the deep end and just let the world see what it is. Like the more you post, the more people are going to come. I feel like that's just what it is. Just keep feeding that beast. That social media beast is voracious. It's hungry. It just wants your content, and you just need to like keep it fed. And it gets angry if you don't feed it, and then takes away your followers.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. So yeah, I mean, we've covered quite the range of topics. We talked about, how you made it as a studio illustrator. We talked about social media. We talked about freelance, contract work, and how to price things. Is there anything else that you think is important to share about how to make it as a successful illustrator in today's changing, climate of illustration, I guess?
I don't know. Like, this is where, I feel like I am a little too humble sometimes, where I'm like, oh, what advice could I impart? Like, what good is my word? But I don't know. I think it's just a matter of making sure that you're constantly challenging yourself as an illustrator, to grow, even if it means drawing something that you're not particularly used to drawing, or studying something that you want to get better at drawing, be it like, cars or industrial equipment. I'm stealing this from Jake Parker, but Jake Parker, I'm probably butchering it. He says that, everyone has a creative, bank in their head, where they need to keep like creative capital in their mind, constantly feeding themselves information, so that when they want to draw something, they can tap into that, account and have something to draw. So it's a matter of keeping yourself stimulated mentally with new ideas and experiences and everything like that. But yeah, I mean, constantly challenge yourself, never stop drawing, find time to do your own work for yourself, because there's going to be a time when you're working professionally where it's not your vision, and you might feel frustrated because of that, because we all, as creatives, have our ideas that we want to, nurture and see it grow and become something where we could get to a point where we have other people working on our ideas for us. Like, that sounds great, but I think it's just a matter of finding time for yourself.
Can you think of a time where you were working on a project and became?
Not necessarily a project so much, but I think when it's like we were talking about this before I think you started recording, but the past couple weeks I just haven't had time for myself to do any artwork for myself, just because like things have been crazy on my end with freelance and moving and wedding preparations and stuff like that. But my most recent post on Instagram, that chef, I was like, I just need to do something where I'm challenging myself. So I tried creating this image in a completely like new style that I don't particularly work in. Because I do like the heavy line work, graphic, pop culture stuff all the time. And that was another thing too, actually, I wanted to touch on, is careful with like pop culture stuff, because I know this seems out of left field, but you start doing it, people react. And I think that's something that I had done on Instagram, where I was relying too much on other characters and, Rick and Morty this and Bob's Burgers that, which I love, and I know people love it when I draw that stuff, but I wanted to do my own thing. So
why do you? Because I know a lot of people who will, draw in their style and take characters from cartoons and things, and kind of do their own versions of that. And some people have been very successful doing it that way. But what do you mean pigeonholing yourself? How have you experienced being pigeonholed, I guess, from
doing that?
Yeah.
Well, yeah. Case in point, I'll spend weeks, posting on Instagram, just, fan art, for lack of a better term. And
Right.
the moment I post something that's, unique to myself, the engagement is low, or I start losing followers. It's stuff like that. And I know at the end of the day, that's all really superficial. You want people following you, but the people that are, like you see that number going down, and I hate to admit it, but that messes with your mind. You're like, oh God, what have I done to betray my dear followers? Because that's what
I'm going through your Instagram post right now, and there's actually like a clear difference in likes between when you post something like Ren and Stimpy, for instance, got a couple thousand likes, and the next day you posted your own thing and only got like 500 likes, and then after that you posted like Rugrats and it got a couple thousand likes. So I guess there is a market for people looking for fan art, maybe through hashtags, or it comes up in their feed or stuff, which is kind of interesting. Do you think there's a difference in the people who like your fan art stuff versus your personal art stuff?
I mean, I don't want to generalize my followers like that. I'm sure I trust that the people following me are following me because they know I'm a good artist in general. But I definitely can tell that there are people following me because I draw, Ren and Stimpy in such a gross, weird way, or I draw, Dr. Zoidberg in a weird, gross way. But the moment I draw my own characters, they're just like, I don't know who these guys are. I don't care for it. Where's my Rick and Morty, stuff like that. But look, I don't mean to bemoan people that are drawing fan art. If you want to do that, that's great. Do that. But you need to be careful, because the moment you start wanting to post your own stuff after you've cultivated this following, by posting all this fan art, you're going to lose them, because they're not there for your original artwork. They're there for your fan art. And that's all fine and good, but I would prefer a lot of times to do my own thing. But I hesitate because I am afraid it's not going to get the engagement that I'm used to. So it's tricky. It's tricky, and I wish I had realized that a little sooner. But when you see your followers increasing, you're kind of like, oh boy, this is it. I finally hit the the right vein. So you're going to keep giving them what they want, and then all of a sudden you find yourself just drawing Rick and Morty over and over again. You're just kind of like exhausted, because that's what I do at work anyway. And I mean, I'm generalizing, of course.
Right. No, but that makes sense. I mean, you're building up a market of people who are expecting a certain caliber of work, expect certain work from you, are kind of not seeing that anymore, I guess. So
yeah. And again, like, I don't know, like, are you creating artwork for your followers, or are you creating it for you?
Right.
I guess that's kind of the question you got to ask yourself.
So what's the goal behind it, I guess, too?
Well, I want to create artwork for myself so I can grow as an artist. Granted, I know you can, again, it's so ambiguous too, because you can grow as an artist doing the fan art. I know I have. I've learned how, like, I feel like I've gotten better at painting digitally while I was still doing this quote unquote fan art stuff, but I want to apply that to my own original stuff. Hence the chef with the swordfish head.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
And I like that one, so there you go.
Thank you.
It's been a great chat so far. Unless there's anything else that you think is valuable to share. I mean, this has been really great to chat.
Thanks. Yeah, I hope that I was able to impart some wisdom. I hope I didn't ramble on and on too much.
Well, thank you so much for coming on the podcast, Lawrence. It's really been great to have you.
Of course.
Now, just before we leave, I want to share how you can follow Lawrence's work. I definitely recommend checking out his Instagram. We talked a whole bunch about that.
Yeah.
It's lawrence.hugh.burns. You can also check out his gallery work, concept art, and storyboards on his website, which is lawrencehugh.com, and I'll share both those links in the description. And okay, that's all for now. Thanks for tuning in.
Thank you, Terry.
All right. Okay, bye.